Welcome to the International Teacher Podcast with your host, Matt the Family Guy, Kent the Cat Guy, and me, Greg the Single Guy. We are recording episodes from around the globe to tell you about the best kept secret in education. That's right, it's teaching overseas. We're glad to have you join us. All right, welcome to our episode on the International Teacher Podcast. This is Greg, and I don't have Kent or Matt with me tonight. That's okay. We have a great guest on. I'm going to have a great conversation, and we're going to listen to his story, how he got into international teaching. And I think you're going to want to stay with us on this episode. He's got a lot of great advice. He's been in the field for quite a while. I'd like to introduce you to Scott Schaffner, and he's coming from Poland to us tonight. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Greg, and I really appreciate the offer to chat.
Did I say your name right, Schaffner?
Schaffner, yeah, Schaffner, that's pretty good. A lot of times I get a Schaffner, or people will just go with Schaefer because it's much more common, I suppose, right?
What do the Polish people say? Do they say Schaffner?
They say Schaffner.
Schaffner. Oh,
Yeah.
I got to work on that a little bit.
I never knew what my name meant until I was actually on a trip. When I was teaching history in Poland, we did a great exchange with a public school in Germany. So you can imagine Polish kids and German kids getting together and talking about history, right? And I was on the train, and all of a sudden they started saying, Schaffner is here. And my students thought I was like some type of celebrity. But meanwhile, it just means the train conductor. So it was a little bit of a disappointment.
Well, you can be a celebrity now that you're on International Teacher Podcast, right?
Needless to say.
Needless to say, exactly. So tell us a little bit about your journey into international teaching.
Yeah, thanks. I feel like I hear this a lot from people who had other careers. My mom was a teacher for her whole career, and I swore I would never get into teaching growing up. It was a rough job. She was a public school teacher in New York City. You know, I remember her walking a picket line, and the way people thought of teachers was less than professional, you know. So I got into law school, and I studied history in undergraduate, became an attorney for a little while in Florida and in New York. And I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it, and kind of just felt this kind of realized I kept thinking about, what if I got into teaching? I was young at the time and was able to didn't have a family. So I said, what the heck, I keep thinking about this. Let me give it a try. So I found kind of not by complete accident, I found a school that before the charter schools really took off. So it's called a magnet school, but the High School of Economics and Finance in Lower Manhattan. And I was attracted to that school because of the location, but also the idea of it. Its mission was to try and promote and get more minorities on Wall Street. I mean, I think, Wall Street CEOs are probably still overwhelmingly white male. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I haven't looked in a while, but I think it's a safe bet, probably. School is 98% minorities. And what was cool is that on Wednesday, school ended at noon, and the kids dressed professionally, and they were put in internships. So they worked in all the biggest companies and banks and stock companies and everything around the world you've heard of. And yeah, it was pretty cool. It was neat. And as soon as I got into it, I loved it. I knew teaching was for me, and kind of never looked back. So that was how I got into teaching. And then if you look at a map, if you Google the High School of Economics and Finance, you'll see it's about 100 meters from the World Trade Center. So it was right in the downtown area there. It's actually the old NYU School of Business many, many years ago. So it was right there. The kids, some of the students would, there was a mall there. They would hang out there, cut class sometimes. So the World Trade Center was almost like an extension of the campus. It was a big part of who we were, and obviously the neighborhood down there. It had its own zip code. It was so massive, right? So we were there on September 11th. So it was life-changing in a lot of ways. Obviously very, very fortunate. Everybody was okay. We had some kids who were a little bit injured, but when we had to evacuate and we got to the southern tip of Manhattan, and kind of a story that hasn't been told too much. There's a movie on Netflix, well, certainly YouTube. I don't know if it's on, I don't think it was on Netflix. Tom Hanks narrated it, and it's about how all these tugboats came to the southern tip of Manhattan on that day just to help people. And so we had all of our faculty and almost all of our students, a couple hundred kids, wind up just getting on tugboats and being taken all over the areas. Some kids slept in a church in New Jersey. School in Staten Island, Curtis High School, took kids in. I wound up on a boat with some students and colleagues up the East River. Yeah, it was crazy, right? And then school was closed.
Pandemonium, right?
Pandemonium. You can't, nothing you could ever train for, prepare for. Working in Lower Manhattan's never boring, but that was, it was surreal, like all those cliches maybe you hear, but thinking you were in a movie, is this really happening? But so the school was closed for a while, six months practically, and we had to go to school from noon to 6 for that time, right by the, as it luck would have it, or if luck's the right word, right near the Empire State Building, which was, if you remember those days after 9/11, there was the anthrax, there was all of this real fear, right? And so being near the Empire State Building was didn't necessarily put people at ease, but we got through it. But when we got back to school, ground zero, as it was now known, or then known, it was becoming a tourist attraction slowly, which was very odd and weird. We had some kids who never came back. They were, PTSD, and we would, be eating lunch and watching the fire department or the FBI raking for human remains. It was hard. It was hard to be there and to constantly be reminded of that situation. And so that had a lot to do with me thinking, what's next? Life is short. I lost some people I knew and grew up with, like everybody practically in New York did. It was rough. And I had heard about this international school teaching thing. My mom is Irish, so I have an Irish passport, and I had studied over there in undergraduate for a little while and traveled and loved it, the experiences you get. I know that's something that you guys talk about on your podcasts. And
Absolutely.
yeah, so it kind of dawned on me that, hey, there's this world out there. And there was a teacher from Austria who was actually working in the school, and had said, "What, have you ever heard of ISS?" And I said no. And well, there was a job fair in Midtown Manhattan. So I said, well, I could live overseas and travel, and I could teach. That sounds pretty good. But who knows? It's what that sounds maybe too good to be true. So between classes, I jumped on the subway and went up to the job fair in a big hotel, and I think in Grand Central. Yeah, I've job fairs ever since I love, because there's a certain energy and excitement that you just can't recreate anywhere else. When you're in the elevator and people are looking at your name tag and, do you know anything about this school in Guatemala? And decisions that are made that are life changing. So it was cool, and I got offered a job teaching history in Poland, which is where my home is still. I've moved
So
around.
wait a second. What year was this? This is right
So
after 9/11. So this is what? When did you go to the job fair? Like in 2002? Or is it
2003.
2003? So you stuck
Yeah.
around for a while, and then it sort of faded and you turned that page and you decided to go to the job fair. And this is an ISS in New York. And you went to that big hotel, and did you this is my favorite topic, of course, but did you research ISS or anything? Did you research before you went to the job fair?
You know, I remember my computer was pretty big at the time, like it was like the internet was still, I mean,
Right.
right? It was like, of course we
Desktop.
had it,
Yeah.
but it wasn't part of life, right? It's still at that point wasn't like you had it was AOL days almost, right?
Right.
Like you had an email address, but not it was different times. So did I research it? Not really. I knew that teacher who she was smart, she was trustworthy. She said, check it out. And yeah, I like I said, what the heck? Let me just see what this is about. Take
So
it.
you interviewed with Poland and you got it. But who else do you remember who else you interviewed with?
I interviewed, well, there was a school in Brazil that I was close with. Like, in other words, you have the first interview, or you go up to the desk and then you get an interview. And I had a second interview.
Wow.
There was one in Costa Rica, there was one in Rome, and I believe there was one in, mm, I want to say, yeah, I can't remember. That one I can't
Yeah, it's
remember.
tough. It's a long time ago, right? I was at the
Yeah, yeah.
Iowa Fair. My first was in Iowa, UNI, at
Yep.
University of Northern Iowa, and I had a very similar experience to you. A little bit more, a few more questions. Were you single at the time, or were you married at the time?
Single at the time, which helps, right? I mean, it makes
Right.
it and like I've heard this story from other people too. I don't know, maybe you have, but I could take a leave of absence from my job with the New York City Department of Education for 2 years. So, what the heck, right? I go overseas. It was 2000. I was going to start in the school year 2004. So Poland had just joined the European Union. So
Ah,
for a history teacher, right, to Poland with all of its rich history, and then to see a country join the EU and what that would look like with the job security of coming back, why not, right?
right, right. No kidding. What a great story. I mean, you went from the devastation of the experience, historical experience of being at ground zero. I mean, that's the whole story on its own. And then to get into international teaching and to risk giving up your job. You probably had, I don't know how, 2 years off that you were allowed to leave New York, or 6 months or a year. What was it?
It was a 2 year leave of absence. And so,
Two
and
year.
that was
Okay. And a lot of states by state, they do it, right?
sure,
And
of course, right?
yeah, and you said, I'm just going to pull up my stakes and I'm going to go to the next chapter and see what happens in Poland. Very similar to my life. I started in 2001. You started yours right around 2003, and I was going to my second school in 2004. So
Okay.
that's another story there. But
That's
the
another
the
podcast.
first, yeah, exactly. Well, the job fair. I mean, I published my book about job fair because it is all about the pandemonium. It's a crazy, crazy roller coaster of the emotions, and you're looking at a map of the world going, oh my God, well, that's somewhere over there, and that's part of this world over here, and you're not quite sure, and you're just sort of throwing yourself in there, and all of a sudden you're interviewing for jobs that are contracts, and they want to offer you positions. Did Poland offer you the position at the job fair, by the way?
They did, but what was great, which I never forgot, is that they they gave me the contract and said, think about it, right? And they do, like all schools, they had like the tourist brochures for
Right.
Poland. And of course I had all the stereotypes, right, of like the Warsaw Pact, the tumbleweed going by in the middle of winter when a wasteland of the tundra of the Arctic, that all that kind of stuff. But yeah, they said think about it. Talk to your family, my parents, my brother, and what do you think? And they didn't put that pressure on. And there was a couple other schools that said, hey, if you're interested, we need to know within 24 hours. Which, now
Yeah.
that I'm on the other side, I get that too, right? You wanna wrap it up and you want to have your hiring done, but that stuck with me. And yeah, I think the next day I said, what the heck, I'm going to go for it. And it didn't hurt. I met some people, and you try and talk to whoever you can in the lobby or in the elevator, and they said, oh no, that's a good school. The American School of Warsaw is a good school. It's been there a long time. It's got a good reputation, good leadership. And so that was kind of the push.
I think at the time then I was introduced, or I had started hearing the name of Chip Barter, and we don't have to talk about him, but
I was about to bring that up.
yeah, he's a director. He was a director, a very tall, very, very, tall man, and very big presence anywhere, and a great personality. And I had a chance years later to interview with him, but it just didn't work out at the time. And I always knew about Warsaw because of him. Something magic happened because this is where you still are. You're a great interview experience for me because I've never talked to anybody that has gone overseas and they're still in the same place that they started with when they went over. Did you go anywhere else in between? And I mean, your story
Yeah,
is
yeah.
massive here. Can you tell
Well,
us a
it
little
is.
bit about it? Did you stay in Poland or what's going on
Well,
next? You get there and
yeah, I just
oh,
and before I'll tell you that,
sure.
Greg. Yeah, it's funny because we were saying we must have people in common, right?
Oh
Chip
yeah,
Barter, a legend, right?
right.
There's the few people who have been around this game that don't know that name or the man, and he's been a mentor and a great friend to my family and just a super guy. And he's retired, but of course he can't help himself. He's still working a little bit, but no, yeah, the like how things can change your life, right? Who knows? So I came here to answer your question, and I taught here for 8 years and was taking on some leadership things, and I met my wife who's Polish, and we got married, and we had a son at the time, and it was after 8 years, and I said, I think I want to try being getting into leadership, try being a
Right.
principal or assistant principal, or who knows, right? I had been a dean in New York and done some leadership stuff, and I don't know, just felt like I could make a bigger impact, right, on students and the student experience. I got my credentials through the College of New Jersey, and that's a place that a lot of people will use, and a lot of people in this world have international school teaching have attended that. They have a summer program in Mallorca, Spain, which was great, and a lot of great professors. So I put my name out there and on Search Associates and said, let's see what happens. And um, had a son, and then my daughter was born. So she was only a few months old when I was interviewing, and my wife said something really smart. It's like, I'm open to going pretty much anywhere, but it's got to be a place where I can take a baby out in a stroller and walk around
Right.
outside and be safe.
Safety.
Right.
Yeah.
And there was a couple interviews where when I put that to them, they said, I can't say for certain that this would be the place where I can say that that would be safe, right? So
Deal breaker right there. And you're like,
yeah,
nope, you have to. And your job interview style had to change based on your family needs, from based on your situation. So the first time you went back in 2003, you were single, and now all of a sudden you have an infant, and a toddler, and an infant, and then your wife. And wow, what a change in strategy it had to be, right?
yeah,
Okay.
it's a good point. I'm not so great at marketing myself, right? It's not something that really most educators are, and it's a good point because it's completely different strategies, interviewing styles, everything. So, yeah, that was part of it. And my wife had a friend whose father into shipping, I think, and wound up she had spent some time in Dubai, and there was a school in Dubai that was interested in that I was interviewing with, and I didn't know anything really about Dubai. I knew that it was in the Gulf, and I knew that it was a new country, and they, oil money, right? Like, but that's
Yep.
about the extent of it. But because my wife's friend and said, no, it's a great place it's safe, and it's a could be a good experience. And then of course talk to some more people and who had been around and who had knew the school and et cetera, et cetera. And really incredibly fortunate. I can't tell you how, the series of fortunate events I've had, but got hired as a principal. So I hadn't been an assistant principal. Like I said, I had been a dean in New York, and I did do a lot of leadership things. Yeah, got hired as a principal. So that was 5 years in Dubai.
Well, you know what? Let's sit on this for a second here. I think a good point to make is what I really notice in what your two experiences, even your two experiences overseas so far in your story. We're going to continue, but so far it's that word of mouth. It means a lot to you to have somebody that you've talked to that's on the ground, that's doing what you're about to go into, like that's either in Poland or in Dubai, as a friend of a friend or somebody else has talked about it. you rely on that. And I personally go with word of mouth first and foremost. I double check, even after I've researched or interviewed or something. I have to call somebody. I don't care who it is. I have to call somebody and find out if they have a connection that can verify about this person as a leader or this school as a reputation. Right? I can't just go on the internet and do that. So I guess the longer I've been overseas, the more I've reached out to connect. And that's the good thing about this kind of a podcast, is that we can give the brutal honesty. We could talk about schools, we could talk about leadership, and we could talk about our own experiences, but that's something you can't get just from research, right? And that's what I love about this. So it sounds like you're just like me. You have to verify with the word of mouth. Where did you go after Dubai? I mean, you could talk forever, I bet, about being the principal there. It's a whole different story. You're in the desert, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But it was great. It was a great
Desert. Yeah.
experience. We loved our time there, and yeah, to anybody who, look, I mean, especially, that was still not that long after 9/11. And to think, you're telling some maybe friends and family back home going to live, you look at the map of where it is, and
The Middle East. Oh
it's
boy.
a little unsettling, but look, I mean, we know that the travel, that's one of the things that travel does. It opens your mind, and you realize, what you read and what you see is not always reality, right?
We could do a whole episode just on Dubai, of course, and we've talked
No
to other
kidding.
people about Dubai, right? And it's like I always tell people, it's the Las Vegas of the Middle East, right? I think
Mhm.
there's certain places that you can relate to, and that's one of the topics I say is Dubai is basically they made it out of nothing. They got a bunch of oil money. They started making this Las Vegas in the middle of the desert, and now it's a super hub of travel. And there's tons of schools there, like you said, there's tons of schools there. You had a little bit earlier experience because they were just still growing.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
That was what, 2011 then, right? Something like that. You were there?
2012, yeah, 2012. I was there from 2012 to 2017, so 5 years there. So yeah, massive changes. I've been back a couple times, and I think it'll continue to just grow. Certainly up in the air, if nothing else, if not spreading out into the desert. But yeah, pretty amazing place. Watching the World Cup a little bit and seeing Doha, it's not dissimilar, right? It's a lot of
Right.
similarities.
I just went to the GRC fair. So they've had two fairs already. And I,
Yeah,
I think
I was in the one. I was in Bangkok.
you were at the Bangkok one. Okay.
Yep, and I was in the GRC from the first year in Dubai. And yeah, I think it's something that along the same lines that best kept secret. That's the GRC is still, it was just starting to catch on before the pandemic hit.
Right.
But it's free. I mean, what a great idea, a true grassroots collaborative where schools get together. It's free for schools, it's free for candidates. Obviously, you have to travel, but other than that, to just come together and I've been doing a lot of hiring through the GRC. There's some great candidates there.
I was going to say it's new to me, and I went there, but I only signed up a week before because I didn't know anything about it. So,
Yeah.
so I think it was Jackman said, "Hey, are you going to the GRC?" What's that? And it's in a week, and we had a 3-day weekend, and I am only about 45-minute flight away from Dubai. So for me to get out and go have some bacon and a beer and interview, but I
Yeah.
didn't have anyone to talk to because I didn't really do any
Uh-huh.
research or connections beforehand. And if I'm not mistaken, my mistake was, or my ignorance was, that job fair really depends a lot on earlier connections. So then they meet you face to face once you're at the fair. Am I off on that, or is it?
No, I think that's true. I think it has become, so competitive. And when you look at when the GRC decided to give this a go, the American School of Bombay are the ones who actually run a lot of the legwork. They have their IT team do the website, and it's all, no profit to them. It's to get the earlier Asia recruits. In Europe, it's the recruiting season, and it used to be a lot later, right? And now the competition
Right.
with so many schools. So the GRC kind of put that marker down and started it in Dubai in November. I believe it, they've had it in November always, right? So And yeah, the thing is you would now I think part of this year is definitely crazy
Of
with
course, because of the post-pandemic, right?
it's the first face-to-face fairs, and are they gonna be sustainable? And those are all kinds of things that we could get to. But I definitely agree, and I think a lot of the recruiters are gonna look ahead of time. They're gonna do an online interview on Zoom or whatever it might be ahead of time. Do the reference checks ahead of time, and you do kind of, Greg, like what we would call the BO test, or that final kind of, you meet the person having a coffee, or a beer and bacon,
Right.
and just getting to know somebody face to face is that final stamp of approval that I'm going to offer them a contract. So, yeah, when I was in Bangkok, it was even, I think, less people than in Dubai, mostly due to the situation in China. But
Right.
we made some hires. I'm recruiting for my previous school, and but it was mostly all the legwork ahead of time.
Do you know what I like about the GRC is that they have a streamlined, well, I asked you about the BO in just a second, but so when I logged in and I was accepted into the GRC, they had a streamlined version where you give your three references. So it's easy for the reference. The reference is basically saying either hire this person or definitely I don't support this person or something like that. It was streamlined so that it was a quick, like, let's have a conversation or not, and
Yeah.
they don't have to bother the other heads because it was put together by heads of school. They know how busy people get, especially during the season. We need to get together and talk, or just hire the guy, or,
Yep.
I'm not quite sure. So that's a great streamlining effect that they did. And I think it's also in response to some of the other job fairs, which cost so much money as headhunters, like the ISS and search. They've come down, some of the fees have come down, but I do know that search is still a pretty hefty price. And a lot of people go with search because it's the big elephant in the room, right? They've been around, they're standard, they're the standard basically for a lot of people. For me, it's ISS, maybe you and I, but GRC is a great option now. The fees are low, there's a streamlined effect to it, right?
Yep. It's a true collaborative, which is exactly what, international educators are about and what we should do. So, yeah, I'm hopeful that the GRC, they don't self promote, they don't advertise, because it's real grassroots.
It's hard to self promote. You know what? You're going to learn how to self promote as soon as you write your first book.
All
That's when
right.
you have to
Well,
you have to promote yourself, and I hate it. These guys make fun of me on the show every time I mention my book. They're
right.
laughing at me. They're like, "Found anywhere at www.amazon.com." I'm like, "Well, come on, you guys. It's not anywhere else that anybody's going to stick up for me, and it's just to get the word out,
Well,
right? That's all we're trying to."
when you mentioned it, I wrote it down. Maybe Santa will bring me a stocking stuffer.
Oh, I'll send you the copy for being on our show. I'll send you a copy. You
Oh,
can read it and let me know what you think of it because you've been to these job fairs. You know how it
oh.
works, right?
Yeah.
Well, you were in Dubai for several years and as a principal. And where did you go after that?
So I went to Hanoi, Vietnam. So
Ah,
we were there for 3 years. My wife is a teacher as well. So yeah, we went to Vietnam. Unbelievable experience, great place to live and to visit, and can't recommend it enough. If
the
you've
Eunice
never been,
School, I believe, right?
yeah, if
Yep.
you've never been to Vietnam, it's a hike, obviously, but what an unbelievable culture, and the friendliness of the people, and really, really good time.
We'll take a moment's break now to remind you how to reach out to us. Of course, you can address any negative comments to Kent, the cat guy. We do love to hear from you. If you're out on Facebook, we don't do that, but our handle on both Instagram and Twitter are at ITPExpats with an S, ITPEXPATS. As a handle, if you want to, you can send us an old email at internationalteacherpodcast@gmail.com, or you can visit us at our new website at www.itpexpat.com. www.itpexpat.com. Well, back to the show.
All right. So you went several places, and I feel bad because I thought you were only in Poland, but no, you've got a
No, well,
rich
that's what you
history
would assume, right?
overseas. Well, you're in this lodge. I mean, your audience can't see you right now, but it's like you're in a flannel shirt, you're in the lodge, and I'm sitting in the desert, right? But it's like you're in a sauna or a wood cabin or
It
something,
does
and
look
there's
like
been,
that.
it's the holiday season, it's snowing outside. So you're back in Poland. And what are you doing now? Are you still in a
So
school situation? Tell us what you're doing now.
yeah, so I'm in an interesting situation. So after Hanoi, I went to Amsterdam and I was working there at the international
I'm
school.
jealous. I'm so
And
jealous.
yeah, it was, I mean, unbelievable opportunity, right? But the pandemic, Greg, it just ruined it ruined my joy of being in schools. You know, I don't know how
Yeah.
else to put it. It was just it wasn't about teaching and learning, you know, as much. It was about a lot of other stuff that you couldn't make people happy. And, you know, I get that, right? That was all over the world. Masks this week, no masks the next week. I can't tell you how many Sunday night, you know, phone calls with 25 seventh graders, either have it or are close contacts. Should we close seventh grade? Should we close the whole middle school? Yes or no? How are we going to get the word out? People don't check their emails the night before, you know, like, I mean,
It was
just
terrible. Yeah.
nonstop. And look, I'm not, it's not woe is me. It's everybody went through this in education. You know, teachers went from being whatever teachers, however they were looked, you know, certainly international school teachers get the respect, I think, in a lot of countries and schools that they deserve. But around the world, all of a sudden, teachers became, you know, essential workers, right? And
Right.
parents had a chance to sit down with their kids every day and see what, you know, I'll use the air brackets, teaching and learning look like. And I use that because we were all winging it. I mean, come on, right? Like there was no playbook for that time. So I want a gap year. To answer your question, I said, let's go back to Poland. Our kids are at the age where they've been in international schools. They can speak Polish and understand it, but they've never had to really read and write. It's a great country. We love it. We've had our home here. So I said, let me take some time and think about what I want to do. And I got about a month and a half into that
You're
and
like, I'm
said,
not going back.
I said, well, you know, like you said, and this is why you know, I can't wait to read your book because I said, you know, one of the things I always loved about recruiting and hiring is the job fairs and sitting there and in the lobby having coffee and people you knew or friends of friends saying, hey, you know, I have this one offer in Thailand and another offer in, you know, Bahrain. What do you know about them? And what should I do? And what about this? And what about that? And just being able to sit and talk that through with people and coach them or ask them questions and make a T-chart, you know, pros and cons if you
Oh
have to.
yeah. I was in an elevator in Iowa. Okay. And I don't know if you ever went to the UNI fair, but it's in Waterloo, Iowa. Anyway, you're in the middle of a field and it's a cornfield in the middle of the winter and there's just icy cold wind blaring through. And you're at this hotel that's across the street from the conference center. If you do it the right way, you stay at the hotel, right? So I'm sitting in the elevator, and this must have been 2004 or 2007, I think. Just like you're saying, the conversations are going around, and I'm having a conversation in the elevator with somebody in front of me that's asking me about Cambodia because I had flown in from Cambodia and I was looking for a new job. The guy in back of me says, "Hey, excuse me, did you say you teach in Cambodia?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Hey, do you know Dave Edson? My wife and I taught with him in Pakistan." And I'm like, "Am I in Iowa right now?
Right.
This is so weird, right?" Oh my God, it's fascinating. You're right, head on with that. Job fairs are about the experience of the whole fair. And I love it and I thrive in that situation because everyone's at a different level. There's a lot of people wandering around that don't know anything. There's a
Mhm.
lot of international people. There's a small percentage of international teachers that are returning to the fair to find their next stop. And there's a whole bunch of the admin that are flying in from their respective countries to get the new teachers. So it's a wild ride. I love it that you're so into this. And I knew that we're kindred spirits once I saw you online. And And I don't remember how I even found your name or heard about you, but maybe it was through Facebook groups. I'm not really sure, but I do
Yeah.
know that you've got a website up and you're helping out with recruiting. So you're not out of the game. It sounds like you're in Poland and you're helping out international teaching in a different way now. What are you doing now with it?
My gap year got about 6 weeks in, and I said, I always thought there would be a niche market, if that's the right way to put it, giving teachers advice. I've done hundreds and hundreds of interviews and CV resume reviews, reference checks, the whole game of hiring and recruiting. And
Both sides of the table. Yeah.
so I, made a website and said, let's see, let me learn something while I'm taking some time off. And I never really made a website before. And I learned how to do that. And I'm still learning about hashtags and LinkedIn, and now I'm on a podcast talking about my website. So this has all been pretty cool for me to figure out and ride the wave. But I've gotten some surprisingly, for me at least, there's quite an interest in people looking for advice, for help. I was fortunate enough to learn this because I got the feedback. But think about it, Greg. How many times have you done an interview, gotten an interview, and not gotten a job? I mean, that's happens to all of us dozens of times,
Many
if not
times.
more.
Yep.
Right. But how you never get a chance for the person to sit down and give you a half hour and tell you, let me tell you why I didn't hire you. Let me tell you what you said in response to this question and why you should never say that, or that. And that's if you make it to the interview, right? If your resume CV has typos, if it doesn't, if it looks, if it's, whatever it might be, right? That 20-second glance of a resume to say, should I give this person an interview or not? All these little things, you don't really get that feedback. If it's hard to recruit, just as it's hard to find a job. I mean, the amount of time and effort admin have to put in to find the right people, it's enormous, right? So I've been enjoying, like, giving some people some honest, advice to say, hey, you can't send that resume out looking like that. Or one teacher, it was really eye-opening for him. I think we did an interview, a mock interview, and we recorded it, and he
Right.
watched it, right? And he took his notes on each question, and I took my notes. And after he watched himself interviewing, he said, yeah, I got to change my game up a little bit. So
Wow.
it's been fun. And conversations like this, right? Like where you like look at the schools people have been in, friends of friends, so it's been keeping me busy on a gap year and led to some fun experiences.
This is what the audience needs to listen to, is that it's really you have a website and you're just offering to help. And it's exactly what I do with my book. I just wanted to reach out and share what I love so much, this career. It's not a job for me, it's a career. I'm a teacher first and foremost. I'm overseas because I love it. I love to travel. I love to teach. I love the kids in different international situations. I love all of the rigmarole. I love, all of these things. You do the same thing. You love this and you want to share. And there's a niche market for us because there's not a whole lot of support out there. There's not enough books. There's not
Mhm.
enough agencies. There's not enough support. It's not easy to talk to these people. And there are so many schools out there, right? There's a little international school of, Scott down in South America somewhere, and it's a garage with 3 students. And the parents have a whole lot of money, but they want to come across as a big school. And next thing you know, you grab the position not knowing much about it because you don't know how it works, possibly first time ever, and you fly down there, no one meets you at the airport, and you find out it's this little garage school. And you don't know any better. And these things happen. I mean, there's so many stories about this, and I'm trying to help people avoid that. Not that school, wherever it may be, God bless them. Let's get that school working. But you need to have at least a better fighting chance of finding the right fit. I have to say that all the time, finding the right fit, because that's what the job fairs are about. You can't just go and see the school, right? You
It's
can't
not
just get
right.
up and go to Poland and look at the school in
No, you're
Poland.
not going to fly in on a weekend. It's almost become cliche, right? Like well, finding the fit, and admittedly, sometimes schools admin will say, why didn't I get a job? It's like, well, it's just not the right fit, and that can mean a million things. But
Yeah,
when
they
you're
can
when
hide
you're
behind it or they can be true about it. Yeah, you're
right,
right.
yep, right, and so because you're not just talking about career, you're not talking about your 9 to 5, so to speak, right? Although we
Nope,
know
it's not a
teachers work
job.
way more than that. It's living. You're going to become, close with the people you work with. You're going to spend time with them. It's a community, and the city or the place where you live. All of those things are just as important as kids are kids, more or less, right? I mean, would you agree with that? Like, of course, there's cultural differences, but when you work and travel into different countries, you work in international schools. Kids are kids. If you can teach, you can teach, but there's all those other things, the dynamics of a school, the politics, the culture that school has, good, the bad, and the ugly. No school's perfect. So fit is a real thing.
I love it that you mentioned that because I had that question. I was on another podcast and they said, "What about the kids? Are they different in overseas schools?" And I said, "Well, you know what? Kids are kids. You're going to have a
Mhm.
lot of differences, but I said, you still have the little boy or the little girl or the high school student or the middle school student. They go through life's changes and they come into your classroom and they're still going to have the same problems, just different flavors, but they're going to have all the problems that middle school or elementary or high school kids have. And that's why being a teacher is so important, to have training and to be certified. And you have to have all that stuff before you go overseas, because first and foremost, it is a job. Like you said, it's a job, but we have so many other things that you have to fit into that school. You have relationships, and the school is what's protecting you from the things that you don't know. So you can do your job and do it well, and you slowly get to know the culture around you through the school itself. It's sort of like your blanket, right? Am I right
Yeah.
about that?
I
Yeah.
agree. I think, the first year at any school, in any new country and city, right? It's that transition is real. Culture shock, call it what you will. There's the graph of the initial honeymoon stage where everything's amazing, and then a couple months in, holy crap, what did I do? And then you come out of that and you start to get your groove on it. And so anybody in their first year, you gotta just suck it up and encourage them to keep at it. And kids are kids. At least you have that part of the job that you can dig into that brought you there, and usually it works out okay. Sometimes it's not a fit. Sometimes the school, the city, the country, the culture, whatever it is, sometimes that's not a fit, and that's okay too.
Right. We're trying to avoid that, though. We want to make sure that you make a good choice. At least, when you're going to go overseas, you're going to go somewhere you could last a year, a 2-year contract, really. The
Sure.
shortest
Yeah.
I've ever seen was 3 days.
Oh
3 days is
gosh.
the shortest I've ever seen before someone ran. It was crazy,
Yeah.
I know. I have one fun question for you, and that is, do you have any police stories for us or customs
that I
stories
could that I could talk about in
that you could share?
publicly.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the comment that everybody gives us.
You could edit this out. No, just kidding. So, boy, I because I have two passports, there's sometimes, some interesting stuff that's asked with that.
Do you travel on your English one or on your Polish one? Is
Irish.
it, and it
It
I'm sorry,
depends.
Irish.
That's okay. That's okay. It really depends where I am and where I'm going, right? And so I always travel with both, though, because I've learned, if they look at them, you get the wrong person on the wrong day, they're going to ask questions. I don't know if this is exactly what you're asking, but we left Vietnam in March of 2020. So right when the pandemic was really, I don't know what you want to call it, setting in, and really, it was the real deal. And there was very few flights. There was only like another 3 days of flights getting out of the country. And we had the new job in Amsterdam, and everything was on lockdown. It was all distance learning already. somehow we said, we're gonna, we were teachers, and everybody was given a chance, like, if you an option, if you want to leave, okay, here's what that's going to mean, and we understand, and because who knows how long this will go on, and it's not a democracy in Vietnam. If the government says things are locked down, that's how it is, right? So we had about 3 days to get all of our stuff, but most importantly, our two cats, which were adopted off the street. And I had young kids, and it was very clear that if we don't get the cats out, that we're not leaving, right? And don't get me wrong, it wasn't like, I still have mixed feelings on leaving and all the rest of it, but it was what we knew what was best for our family. Anyway, the experience of getting out of Vietnam with everything closing, we had to fly to Frankfurt. But with the cats was like that wild piece, right? Because they have to have chips in them and all of these blood tests and almost their own passports and all the rest of it. And unbelievably difficult and challenging. Not sure if they would even meet us in Frankfurt. And we get off the plane at Frankfurt, and had some problems with my American passport versus
Right.
Irish one. And oh man, where are the cats? How are we going to find them? Oh my God, we had to rent a car. Frankfurt Airport was closing the next day. Had to rent a van with all of our belongings and drive to the Polish border because the EU borders were closed. And all of a sudden, we look down, and kind of like on a bench in the room, there's two cats sitting there. No one's
You're
watching
kidding.
them. Just
Oh my God. Grab the cat, honey. Let's go.
anybody could have taken them. It went from, like, I don't know, Mission Impossible to just,
Yeah.
whatever. So that was pretty crazy.
After all that worry, and then there's just two cats just sitting right there.
Yeah,
You're like,
exactly.
oh my God, they're there. Grab them. We're not asking. We're just going to go run for the border. What a story.
Literally.
No, that's exactly what we're looking for. We're looking for the people they get worried when we say police stories, like, well, tell us about when you were locked up in Turkish prison. No, we're not getting at that. We're just like, I smuggled bacon into Kuwait once. That was a story about, traveling. And there's police stories like I had to bribe police in Venezuela or something for some reason, right? And it's part of living overseas. So those are the stories we love. And the cat story, I think you're the third or fourth cat story we've had on the show. And Kent's going to be like, damn, I wish I had been on that show with you. He's a cat man, of course. So your two cats made it to Poland with you?
Yeah, our two cats, Boon and Cha. Boon Cha is the national dish in Vietnam, right? So I like I like to joke that they were saved from a soup pot, but that's maybe not politically correct. But yeah, we adopted two cats, and so they're back in Poland with us now, and that was good. But yeah, I like I said, my wife is Polish. There's actually a pretty big Polish community in Dubai, so we've had some suitcases full of kielbasa in the airport.
Nice.
Is going on too.
Yeah, you got, and sometimes they let stuff like that in, sometimes they don't. I know you get stopped at the border, people are trying to bring all kinds of meats and foods in, and whether it's vacuum packed or not. And right. So many stories. Well, listen, I want to mind our time here. How about some advice for teachers and listeners that are thinking about going into overseas like you and I have been doing? What are some last words of advice or any kind of message you want to give?
First timers, you mean, like people who are thinking of it?
Sure.
Well, keep an open mind. There's so many schools out there and places that you would never imagine, picture yourself enjoying and loving. And unless you go into it with an open mind and see what options are out there and be flexible, it's hard. I have some clients who I only want to work in this region or this country. And that's really, really difficult and unlikely. There is such a world of opportunity out there. I think that's one of the most important things you can do. The other thing is make sure you have good references. I mean, child safeguarding, has become a legitimate, real thing that schools have to take seriously, which is a good thing for everybody. But that means we also talk to references a lot more. And so keep it in mind when you're working. And there's always, when at work, whether you're in the States or in North America or anywhere you work, there's always challenges, and you could always get disagreements. But but you are going to need some people to vouch for you, right? Because like we said, when we want word of mouth when we're going to go to a school, I want word of mouth when I'm going to hire somebody, right? And so how do they react to setback and all the rest of it? You could be a great interviewer, but references are important too. That's something that a lot of people maybe don't always keep in mind.
Well, that is some great advice, but it really makes me just want to stay on for another episode with you and talk specifically about recruiting. But I would like to invite you to come back on our show and specifically do a recruiting kind of discussion. All right. And we've had several, and I think it's really going to be helpful to our listening group, our audience, to hear more about how to really recruit internationally, because it's a different ballgame than it is in the States and North America, Canada, other countries. So let's think about that. And I appreciate your coming on to this show. It's been a real joy to talk with you, and our audience is going to get but they've learned a lot from you. I think I have, and I've been in this for a long time.
Hey, come on, Greg. Thanks, though. Thanks. And and so I'm trying to, I read my LinkedIn, how to, get your business. So it's jobhunthelp.org.
And we'll put that down in the bottom of our notes. Of course, we're going to link that for you. I was waiting for you to plug that.
Hey, I had it on my notes here, so that's good. So, hey, I appreciate it. Yeah, I'd love to talk more. I think there's a lot to think about, a lot to learn. I guess the last thing I'll leave with is teaching. You could be a fantastic teacher in a classroom, right? And have those relationships with kids and all the rest of it. But unlike a lot of things, you're going to get a job based on a piece of paper or an e-paper, right? Your resume, and an interview, sometimes online, right? Actually has nothing to do with your teaching ability. And that's pretty odd, right? Like we're hiring people and we have to go on things that actually I wish I could just see you teach, right? But we don't have that luxury 90% of the time. So it's its own little thing.
So be who you are, and show in your interview, show who you are outside of just teaching. The recruiters really want to know that, right?
I agree.
Because they're not just getting another teacher from wherever. They're not just getting another teacher for the job. They're getting a person that's going to fit into their community and fit into that culture. And listen, Scott Schaffner out of Poland, I love talking with you, and we are going to have to say goodbye for now, and we'll see you on another episode, hopefully in the future. How about that, Scott?
That sounds good. Thanks so much for the time. I appreciate the plug, and it was really interesting talking to you.